Up next on the TWIP Network, Gordon Lang and I put together our end-of-year 2015 show on All About the Gear. Hi, it's Doug Kay. I'm here with Gordon Lang from Brighton, England, and this is the end of 2015 here on All About the Gear, and this will be our end-of-year wrap-up show where we look at the best gear that we've used this year, most of it which has come out during the year. Good afternoon, Gordon.
Hello, Doug. How are you?
I'm great.
This is our Gear of the Year show. We've picked 5 products each that we're going to describe to you over the next 45 to 50 minutes or so. We've given ourselves 4 minutes per product to try and tell you the highlights of them and to be very strict on that timing. Doug has a gadget that is going to tell us when our time is up.
Yes, it's my $700 or $800 timer here, aka iPhone, and it's going to keep us on track.
All right.
So, it's been quite a year for photography. I guess we've said that every year, perhaps, but I'm very impressed with everything that's come out along the way. One of the first things we want to talk about is one of your choices. It's this little guy, the Sony RX100 Mark IV. Tell us about this guy.
Okay, so the Mark IV is the 4th generation in the RX100 series. They all have one thing in common, which is a 1-inch 20 megapixel sensor, although Sony has put in a new generation in the Mark IV. To just kind of have an overview of what this product is, it's a larger than average sensor in a camera that is still pocketable. And the thing that makes the Mark III and the Mark IV really special is the pop-up electronic viewfinder, which is amazing because it just literally disappears inside the body and it's really good quality. Sony has in fact upgraded it on the Mark IV. It's a really high resolution panel and it's just such a joy to compose through that viewfinder with this camera. But where Sony has taken it in a really interesting direction is to equip the Mark IV with a set of features that will absolutely delight videographers. It has got a wealth of slow motion video, all the way from being able to do 1080p, genuine 1080p at 120 frames per second, and then all the way up to 960 or even 1,000 frames per second at gradually lower quality. And the 240 frame per second mode is just under full HD and it looks fantastic. So the ability to film slow motion in such a tiny product is great. If you're into filmmaking, it also does 4K video. And of course, it has all of the other things that that series has had before. You know, it's got a tilting screen, it's got the pop-up viewfinder, built-in Wi-Fi with NFC. You're looking at about $950 for the Mark IV. If you don't need those slow motion modes, look out for the Mark III, $200 cheaper, $750. You still get that built-in electronic viewfinder, tilting screen, Wi-Fi, and really, really nice quality. So that is my first pick. How long did I take? Are we ahead of schedule?
You're less than 2 minutes, but I have some additional comments to throw in to stretch it out a little bit. Because I did upgrade from the 3 to the 4, not for any really particular reason. I agree with you. I think the Mark III for a non-videographer is an extremely, quite a good camera. And I don't think any sane person should bother with the upgrade. But not being sane, I went ahead with it anyway. The reason I like this camera, even though it's pricey, is I call this my 24 to 70 in a pocket. And this is a camera that I will take out if I go out to dinner while let's say I'm doing a workshop and I'm using a larger camera all day long, but I don't want to carry a camera. I want something just in my pocket. This can be my 24 to 70 equivalent that fits inside a bulging pocket. And that is a marvelous use case. I can shoot with it at night. I can go to restaurants. I tend to shoot a lot that I convert to black and white, so the noise isn't really a problem for me. But the image quality is spectacular. It's an extremely versatile camera.
I really like the way that not only can you charge it over USB, but on the latest version, you can actually power it while you're using it over USB, like the A7R Mark II, the Mark II versions of their full-frame alpha mirrorless line. Sony's really thinking about how people use these cameras in practice, and I love that facility.
Yeah, and I want to echo that. You know, you've been on this bandwagon for a long time, and I've sort of poo-pooed it, but I took this camera to Cuba, and I got to tell you, because it was an occasional camera in particular, I didn't take a spare battery. I was really glad not to have another charger. All I had to do was take a micro USB cable, which of course I had anyway, and that was it. And, you know, I only charged it every few days. It was just really nice not to have another box, little chunky thing to take with me. Okay. Hey, we beat that one. We beat our 4 minute mark.
We're ahead of schedule. Reset.
We're doing really well. Okay, let's go up a little bit from these 1-inch sensors and let's talk about another camera of your choice, the Lumix G7.
Yeah, a lot of people who are getting into so-called series photography, say they're upgrading from a phone or a point-and-shoot camera. They want a camera with good quality, with interchangeable lenses, a viewfinder, all of that sort of thing. And the first place that they naturally look is at an entry-level DSLR. And there's so many people who come to me and say, oh, what entry-level DSLR should I get? And Canon, Nikon do some fantastic entry-level DSLRs. But for me, I reckon a much more appropriate product is an entry-level or a mid-range mirrorless camera like the Lumix G7. Now, you're looking at about $600 now for the Lumix G7 with the 14 to 42 millimeter kit zoom, which is their standard, rather small, but actually surprisingly good quality kit lens. Now, at that price point, you'd think, oh, it's going to be pretty basic feature-wise, but it's not. It's got a fully articulated screen that's also touch sensitive. It's got a fantastic electronic viewfinder built in. Suffice it to say, it also has Wi-Fi. And being a Panasonic product, the 4K video also supports their 4K photo mode. The really clever thing about this is that it lets you very quickly and easily extract, save still photos from footage. So the idea is this: if you're seeing some sort of action taking place, like somebody doing a trick on a bike or whatever, a sporting action. Are you going to be partaking in sporting action today? Then don't just try and capture the moment as it happens. Instead, use 4K photo. So what it does is it's actually recording video. So you start recording nice and casually and relaxed before the action moment happens. The moment happens, and then afterwards you stop it. And then here comes the magic. You actually kind of scroll through this video one frame at a time until you find the decisive moment, and then it lets you save it as a JPEG. You may be thinking, well, you've always been able to do that with video. The two things that make this different is that Panasonic got a really nice user interface in camera, makes it very easy for you to do it. But because you're capturing 4K video, which has got 4 times the amount of detail as 1080p, the stills are not just 2 megapixels, there are 8 megapixels. Okay, that's not huge, but it's good enough. It's good enough for a lot of situations. So again, it shows Panasonic thinking of some really cool ways to exploit that technology. And when you package that all together, for me, especially with fantastic face detection as well, it just makes it such an easy product to use. And if someone was saying to me, I want an entry-level DSLR, I would steer them towards products like the Lumix G7 instead.
Yeah, I think that, Panasonic with the Lumix line has obviously been a leader in video, and they jumped on this 4K video for stills bandwagon. And I think, if I'm not correct, the G7 is one of the first cameras that has a dedicated mode for that. Is that right? I think that's the one you can switch to doing 4K video.
Yeah, I think it's got a position on the dial for it.
Right.
But if it hasn't, you can just access it through the menus. They're putting it on absolutely every camera now.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting as we go into 2016 to see how much this catches on. Because on the one hand, it really is a convenient way to shoot action when you want to defer the choice of which exact exposure to use. On the other hand, it does require an extra step. So it's not like just pushing the button and you have a JPEG. You have to actually go in and select one of those frames, either on the camera or later, although with the Lumix, it's quite easy to do on the camera. So it'll be interesting to see if this catches on or not. Certainly, this is something that Lumix is touting quite a little bit.
Do I have a few more seconds?
Yeah, we do.
Cool. I'll also mention that it's not just for action. It's surprisingly useful in portraiture, especially of kids, because what you do is, instead of again getting the person to pose and you're waiting, there's the smile, click, I've got it. Instead, you just keep rolling. And the kids or the subject are going through all manner of different expressions. And then you go through them afterwards and you see the eyes slowly blinking and opening. And then you'll catch that brief moment where they're looking straight into the lens, and you get a fantastic picture. And of course, you can keep the video as well. So you've got that ability to say video, somebody blowing out a candle on a birthday cake, as I like to do on a nightly basis. And then they're only looking into one camera, and you can get good stills and video at the same time. I love this convergence. Yeah, I think we're ahead of schedule. Doug, we should have done more products. 3 minutes each.
I know. One of the things that I found when I was using these cameras, though, in this 4K for video, is you do have to think a little differently, and that is to push the button maybe a little before you actually see the action. If you're shooting, for example, baseball, or dare I say cricket, and you're trying to catch the moment right when the bat hits the ball, you're not going to get it right. You really need to anticipate it. You need to start that video a moment or two earlier and let it run through that time window. So it's an interesting experiment. Okay, we've used up our 4 minutes for that guy. Let me start our timer again. We're going to keep ourselves honest here, Gordon. We're going to do very well. I want to talk about a camera that you reviewed at the end of last year. I reviewed at the beginning of this year. So it sort of qualifies as a 2015 camera, and that's the Fujifilm X100T. I don't have one here, but this is a camera that comes in at $1,300. It has a non-interchangeable lens. It's an APS-C camera, so it has a crop sensor, non-interchangeable, non-zoom lens. I think is it a 28 or a 23? Can you remember?
I think it's equivalent to 35 millimeters.
Equivalent to a 35, yeah.
That would be a 22 approximately.
Yeah, something like that. So it's the equivalent of a 35 millimeter on a full frame. So it's a slightly wide angle. And for those of you who follow my photography, I have become a pretty dedicated street photographer. So this is not a camera for everyone. I accept that. Maybe no camera is a camera for everyone. But the Fuji X100T is a terrific camera for someone who wants to walk around with a very simple camera, one that's got very intuitive controls, terrific image quality, and wants to do street photography and isn't afraid to get close. This is not your stand across the street, shoot with your 200 millimeter lens camera. This is get in close, approach people, shoot your architecture, whatever you want to do, but it is a marvelous street camera for only $1,300 US. Did you enjoy that camera too?
I did very much. The thing that really makes the X100T special is the viewfinder, which is a hybrid design. It can present an optical rangefinder view where you have a frame showing you what you're going to capture, but because it's a rangefinder, you can see around it. So if someone's walking along, you can see them entering the frame before they've actually done it. But the really cool thing is, so before I continue, you can have that view, or you can switch it to a normal electronic viewfinder, or, which was unique to the X100T, you can actually have part of the electronic viewfinder overlaid, superimposed in the corner, which you can use for focusing aids. So you imagine you shooting with this optical rangefinder view, and then being able to superimpose in the corner like a magnified portion of the AF area, because that's always the problem with rangefinders. They're quite difficult to focus. Great for composing, again for street, ideal, but not so great for focusing. But with the little window, you can actually see a magnified view, get the benefits of electronic composition, but still with the benefits of optical composition. And Fuji have also managed to overlay a ton of guides and information on that display. So the viewfinder is really where it's at. And I wanted to ask you, Doug, out of the three viewfinder modes, the fully optical, the fully electronic, or the optical with the little window, which do you normally use for your street shooting?
When I had the camera, I used the fully electronic.
Really? Okay.
That's the one I opted for, yeah. And that's because at the time I was shooting, which was about a year ago, I had not spent a lot of time with a rangefinder camera. Now, since then, all the first half of 2015, I shot exclusively with a rangefinder Leica. So I might change my mind today. But I like the choices. And there are two things I love about all the Fuji cameras. One is the quality of the images. Straight out of camera, it is really hard to beat the Fujis in terms of image quality, color rendition. They're just gorgeous. And the other thing, and this is somewhat controversial, I happen to love the controls. I love having, in the case of the X100T and some of the others, the aperture settings on the ring. I can dial in an aperture, or I can simply select A for automatic. Shutter speed, I have a shutter speed dial. I don't have that silly mode dial that we're so used to from DSLRs. I don't have P, A, S, M. I say I've got shutter speed, I've got aperture, I've got focus. Oh, time's up. Well, that's a good opportunity to segue into another Fujifilm camera, one of your favorites for the year.
Yeah, there were a lot of fantastic mid-range mirrorless cameras released in 2015, and one of my favorites was the Fujifilm XT10. Now, this really takes essentially most of the XT1, which I happen to have here. The XT1 is a camera that I use a lot for my personal photography. I've got it here with the 90mm telephoto lens, which I hope to get a chance to mention later on in the show. The XT1 has got fantastic controls. Again, the image quality that we talked about, same as the X100T in that regard. But the XT10 gives you this quality and most of the control in a smaller, lighter, and more affordable package. You're looking at about $800 with the 16 to 50 millimeter kit, or about $1,000 if you want it with the brighter 18 to 55 millimeter kit. Or, of course, you could buy it body alone and add one of any number of the excellent Fujifilm lenses. But the XT10 just lets you get into that Fuji image quality at a lower price point than before. And the interesting thing about it is that I know a lot of people who shoot with the XT1 who bought an XT10 as a backup camera and end up shooting more with the XT10 than with the XT1 because it is smaller, it is lighter. The things that it's lacking from the XT1, it doesn't have weather sealing. The burst shooting isn't as deep. But otherwise, you got the same quality, you got the same autofocus, much the same controls. And as you said, the thing that just absolutely delights, continues to delight with the Fujifilm X system is the image quality. People again ask me a lot, which camera do you think delivers the best image quality? And they assume I'm going to talk about some full frame product, you know, like maybe a Canon 5 DSLR or a Sony A7R Mark II. And obviously those cameras are packed with resolution. You can't out resolve those cameras with a 16 megapixel product, which this is. But as you say, the quality of the pictures straight out of camera, the JPEGs using the film simulations, they're just absolutely gorgeous. You don't need to do anything to these pictures at all. And it's quite revealing that some of my photographer friends who were very diehard Nikon and Canon users and very diehard raw processing photographers switched to Fuji, and slightly reluctantly at first, but now have fully embraced JPEG and are shooting and presenting a lot of JPEGs without modification. I post loads of images from this system. I never do any post-processing, so you can see that on my social streams. And they're as delighted with them as I am. I just think it's a great camera. So again, if you're looking for a mid-range mirrorless camera that gives you that Fuji quality at a lower price than the XT1, have a look at the XT10. It is a really sweet price point.
Yeah, that is a remarkable deal to be able to come in under $1,000 for a superb camera with a great kit lens. Like you say, the higher end zoom, which comes in, I think, just like you say, under $1,000 combined, is a great deal. And yeah, I can't agree with you more about the JPEGs. You know, you can shoot with all these Fujifilm cameras in RAW plus JPEG, and you can select which JPEG you want. It can be a sort of a flat, normal, standard image, or you can play around with one of the film simulations or go to black and white. And when I shot with the Fuji cameras, I found that I was using, I would end up using the JPEG. I would say, well, why bother with the RAW? Because the JPEGs are just gorgeous.
Completely agree. I always shoot in RAW plus JPEG, and I never use the RAW. I use RAW for my reviews at Camera Labs because people want to see what the RAW conversions look like. But for my personal work, I haven't actually processed a RAW file for about 2 or 3 years. I still keep them, so they're just occupying space on my network attached storage, not my hard drive, my SSD. But I never use them. Yeah, but yeah, I can't let go. I can't let go, Doug.
I understand. So, yeah, someday you'll make the break. So this is interesting. Your next camera is from Olympus. And what's interesting about, as I look at the cameras we're going to review here today, not review, but summarize, there is no camera here from the big DSLR guys. All of our cameras are from the 4 manufacturers of mirrorless cameras, and that is Sony, Fujifilm, Olympus, and Panasonic Lumix. Fascinating, and I don't think that's a prejudice. I think we both come from the world of larger cameras. We have larger cameras. We love our larger cameras, but I find, just to give us a little side note here, Gordon, isn't that just an interesting phenomenon?
Yeah, I noticed that when I was putting the list together, and it's simply because the mirrorless manufacturers are developing at a faster speed. They're being much more innovative, and they're embracing technologies that make photography not just more fun, but easier. They let you get the result you want more easily. And I feel that Canon and Nikon, while they are still producing some fantastic DSLRs, they're kind of becoming old-fashioned compared to these products. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do to address that in 2016. But right now, in our list, all the products that I'm going to recommend are mirrorless products.
Yeah, same here. So, all right. So we have the big 2, Nikon and Canon, who didn't make the cut this year, but to round out the little 4, the bottom 4, what's your favorite camera from Olympus?
Okay, it's the OMD EM5 Mark II, which technically is not the flagship camera. The EM1 is still the flagship camera, but for me, the EM5 Mark II is the more desirable product, and it is possibly my perfect camera, as close to a perfect camera for me and my style of shooting as possible. It's quite small. It's a little bit smaller than the EM1, maybe a bit too small for people with big hands, but I don't have big hands, so that's fine. It's light. It feels fantastic. The controls are extremely well thought out. I haven't even mentioned any features here. I'm just talking about the ergonomics here because I think it's very important with a camera, or critically important, that it has to be very comfortable. Things have to work intuitively, but the camera also has to call out to you while it's on a shelf or something. Go, please take pictures with me. Take me out. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Come back. It has to call out to you, and this camera really does call out to me. Okay, features. It's micro four thirds, so the sensor is a little bit smaller than APS-C. This means that you are not going to match noise levels at high ISOs, but that is not an issue for my style of shooting because I can shoot at the lowest ISO, 200 ISO, the base sensitivity on these cameras, thanks to the fact that I don't take pictures of things that move, and because of the amazing built-in stabilization. Now, Olympus, as you know, shifts the sensor to stabilize any lens you attach, and each generation gets better than the last. The EM5 Mark II, if you fit it with a 24mm equivalent lens, 12mm in the micro four thirds format, I can handhold that, and this is with my shaky coffee hands, I can handhold that at 1 second. That therefore allows me to shoot at 200 ISO in dawn or dusk. I can shoot in the blue hour, handheld, without having to shoot with the aperture wide open or without having to bump up the ISO. And that in turn lets me get many, many more shots set up. Because in the blue hour, you've only got maybe half an hour to grab that magic shot. If you're on a tripod, it's going to slow you down. You might only get 1 or 2 setups. I'm running around with a completely hand-holdable system that's producing great results. I'm getting 5 or 6 different setups in the same time. It also has a fully articulated screen. That's very important to me because I shoot in the portrait orientation frequently. It fits really well for the slightly square shape of micro four thirds. But if you've only got a vertically tilting screen, when you put the camera on its side, well, that screen just lets you look around corners. However, if it's fully articulated, you can twist it around the other way and still get that benefit of shooting high or low. It's a touch screen, as with all the Olympus and Panasonic cameras. Why more people don't do this, I don't know. Don't be prejudiced against touchscreens. They are fantastic on cameras. People who don't like them, I've generally found, are people who haven't used them. Sorry if that sounds disrespectful, but it's the case in so many instances. They are so useful. If you don't like it, switch it off. It's got Wi-Fi, of course. It's got this neat 40 megapixel mode on it that actually uses the sensor shift mechanism. Again, this is only suitable for completely static compositions, but it actually moves the sensor around 8 times and uses it to demosaic the color filter array, therefore getting rid of moire effects, and effectively quadruple the resolution. It delivers these massively detailed files. It's just a really, really, really nice camera. I mean, if you're into shooting action in very, very low light, it's not the best camera for you. Olympus is also, while they are getting better at video, the video is not amazing compared to Panasonic and Sony. But if you're a still shooter, and especially if your subjects remain mostly static, it's magnificent. And the face and eye detection is also very, very good. I use it to shoot my kids with large aperture lenses so easily wherever they are in the frame. So about $850 for the body alone, the OMD EM5 Mark II, arguably my favorite camera this year.
Well, you timed that perfectly. I'm looking at my stopwatch here. Very well done. And, the fact that we do the show together, sometimes I look forward to the controversy, and but we don't have any this year. I'm exactly aligned with your choices. I think if you're interested in small camera video, your call for the Lumix G7 is spot on. I think that if I didn't want video and I wanted to go micro four thirds, I absolutely agree with you. The EM5 Mark II is the camera to buy today. It is a marvelous camera for still photography. And as you said, especially if you're shooting things that don't move and you want to use slow shutter speeds, what a marvelous camera. But I'm going to go in the other direction. You love fully articulating screens. You love cameras that are reasonably priced. And I'm going to go to a camera that doesn't have an articulating screen, that cost a bloody fortune, and that is my favorite camera right now that I'm using, and that is the Leica Q. Now, this is not for the weak of heart. Notice that the branding's covered up. The red logo has black tape on it, and so forth. And that's because you don't want to walk around the street. Not that someone's going to steal your camera, but everybody wants to talk to you about this camera. So what is the Leica Q? First of all, it's a $4,200 camera, making it the priciest camera we're going to talk about today. It has a 28 millimeter non-interchangeable lens, f1.7 Summilux, gorgeous lens. It's a full frame camera. And it has controls very similar to the X100T. So it might not surprise you that I like the X100T and the Leica Q, because they're very much the same. And that is, again, an aperture ring that has real aperture detents on it and an A for auto aperture, a shutter speed dial that has just shutter speeds and an A, manual focus. And if you rack the manual focus all the way to one edge, you get autofocus. The autofocus is contrast only, but it is incredibly fast, incredibly accurate. And I have just learned to love this camera. If you're a street photographer and you can afford it, I think the Leica Q is about the best you can do today if you don't want to go to the really expensive Leica cameras. Now, I want to mention, if you want to know more about the Leica Q, go back and look at my long review. But another camera that I want to mention in this context is the Sony RX100 Mark II, which is a full $1,000 less expensive. It's getting rave reviews. The image quality is great. So for $1,000 less, you get a very similar camera. I happen to like the look of the Leica a bit more in the images. Some people like Steve Huff likes the RX1 a little bit better. And one of the things that just happened this morning, in fact, is that it looks like there's a bit of a recall out for that camera, or they've taken it off the shelves. There's some problem apparently with the autofocus on the RX100 Mark II, and it's temporarily not being sold, but hopefully by the time you see this show, maybe it'll be back on the shelves. But anyway, that is, I know it's a bit obscure. I know very few people in our audience are going to want to go out and spend $4,200 for a camera, but if you want one of the best non-interchangeable, non-zoom cameras, this is the way to go.
I think one of the things that's worth mentioning about the RX100 Mark II is the pop-up viewfinder, which initially looks like the same mechanism as the RX100 series. But on the RX100, the viewfinder pops up, and then you need to pull out the housing for it to focus properly, for it to produce a focused image. But on the RX100 Mark II, it does that all in one go. And even when you push it back down again, it kind of folds back in again. So hopefully we'll see that physical mechanism on future RX100 series, because it is very, very neat. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like, I've not shot with the Mark II, so I'm looking forward to doing that at some point. Did you get a chance to use it?
I did. Yeah. Very briefly at a Sony event. It's very nice. It's the original RX1R. RX1R. Was not the fastest focuser in the world, and they have improved that. I mean, basically, they put the sensor of the A7R Mark II in there with its embedded face detect system. It's not as fast as the A7R Mark II autofocus because of the lens that's in front of it, but it is faster. It's undoubtedly a very impressive little camera, little full frame compact. I mean, who would have thought that we're getting full frame sensors in something that, it's not going to go in a jeans pocket or a shirt pocket unless you want a large bulge in there. But these are still very, very, very compact cameras and incredibly capable cameras. What a time to be alive.
It is terrific. I can only imagine what 2016 will bring.
The fly car.
So with that, we're coming to, we ended up with the same selection for Camera of the Year, which in one way surprises me, but then again, when you consider the camera, it doesn't. Here's the drum roll, please. What is our Camera of the Year, Gordon?
Jordan. The camera of the year.
Wait a minute, more coffee.
Is the Sony A7R Mark II. Very deservedly so, because this camera has absolutely everything. I mean, Sony's developing at such a tremendous pace here. It must be terrifying for other manufacturers, because they've managed to completely address most of the issues with the first generation while introducing a ton of extra features that really improve the performance in such a short period of time. And this camera is such a world apart from the original. I mean, the A7 the A7R, one of the original full-frame alpha mirrorless cameras, had a lot of good things in it. High resolution, 36 megapixels, as I recall, but it had some issues. The shutter kind of wobbled the body a bit, and we all wondered, oh, you know, is it even possible or practical to have that high resolution in that smaller body? Maybe that's what you need a DSLR for, you know, the heft. But with the A7R Mark II, one of the most impressive things for me, apart from just the ton of features that are in it, is the fact that they've thought very carefully about how you're going to maximize its now higher 42 megapixel resolution, electronic first curtain shutter, very, very good damping, electronic second curtain if you want as well for a totally silent mode. It's got a lot of technologies in there, built-in stabilization that really try hard to make sure that when you take a picture with it, you'll stand a good chance at getting 42 megapixels worth of information from it. The embedded phase detect autofocus system as well, eliminating front and back focusing. I tested it alongside Canon's 5DSR, which under the right conditions can produce amazing results. But you may have front and back focusing errors on it. If you want to use mirror lockup on it to avoid any shake, well, then it becomes a slow live view camera. If you're going to be shooting in live view, why not get a native live view camera like the A7R Mark II? And then when you put the Metabones adapter on it, it's important to say that this is not a, you know, this is now going out of the Sony system, and you put a modern EF lens on it. It can, in some respects, autofocus it better, a Canon EF lens, than a native Canon DSLR, simply because it has this very wide array of phase detect AF points and the ability to exploit very bright aperture lenses.
Yeah, I owned the original A7R, and I since sold it. It was a 36 megapixel camera. I didn't need 36 megapixels. I experienced the same problems that others had with vibration at reasonable shutter speeds, you know, from like a 50th of a second up through 200th of a second, something like that. And there were a lot of things that I didn't really like about it. But when I got this, I realized that we have a camera here that, well, let me put it another way. When people like Sony, Panasonic, Olympus have all these different models, especially Sony and Panasonic, they tend to put a different mix of features with different models. And when they come out with a new one and say, all right, it's going to excel in one area, but not in another. It'll be good at low light, but not something else. When they came out with the A7R Mark II, Sony did what I think is put all the best of everything that they could in the same camera. And that was really what convinced me that this was a camera I wanted to own. I have, by the way, since gotten used to having 42 megapixel images. It wasn't that hard to convince me. I don't go out and shoot thousands of images at an event and keep all of the images at that size. Oh, we're running over now. My goodness, what are we going to do? Well, I guess we get double the time because we both picked this.
Well, no, it was one of mine as well. So I think that's right. It.
Yeah. So
actually, well, we should say that also we've reviewed all of these products on previous All About the Gear shows. So if you think, hey, you've really piqued my interest in one of these cameras, just go back and look at one of those older shows, and you'll see a whole show devoted to it.
Absolutely, absolutely true. I think but again, what I like about this camera is it has almost all the best of everything that Sony can do in one camera. And that attitude alone is worth something to give it Camera of the Year. But the image quality is superb. The resolution is mind-boggling. It works. The autofocus is great. It's paired very well with the Sony lenses or the other alpha mount lenses that you can buy for this. So it's just a terrific camera. It's $3,200, so it's not cheap. It is the high-end Sony at this point, but really just a gorgeous camera. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to talk about some non-camera things here. I'm going to put out a couple of them here that I particularly like. One, if you come away from my $4,200 Leica Q, I want to go down to $3.99 because I want to tell you about a little app that runs on iPhone and Android called Galileo Offline Maps. This is my app of the year. For $4, I can get vector maps that are based on what's called the OpenStreetMap model. And for example, I went to Cuba. I loaded up the Cuba map. The Cuba map was only 8.4 megabytes. I mean, it's tiny, but it has all the streets in all of Cuba. It's remarkable. The California map is only 118 megabytes in size, just incredibly compressed. Every street in California is in there. It works offline. You only need the GPS. You can also add bookmarks to it. You can export and import GPX files. You can do track logging so that if you want to tag your images, you can run a track log and then import that into Lightroom or other utilities to tag your images. And one of the things with any mobile app is always the user interface. How hard is it to figure out where to get things? Do I have to click here? Do I have to click there? You know, there's a learning curve. And Galileo offline maps has virtually no learning curve. It is so intuitive. So if you're interested in having offline maps to supplement your photography, either with GPS tracking or not, check out Galileo offline maps. I'm going to mention one more before I get back to you, Gordon. Also, another product that I've fallen in love with is a series of camera straps. You know, Gordon, how many camera straps do you think you're on? How many different ones?
Well, I use the official Camera Labs camera strap, Doug, of which I've got about 4 of them. So that's the one I use. And in fact, if you're watching the video, you can see I'm even wearing a Camera Labs T-shirt that I'll be selling in 2016. So if you like the look of that, you can check out the site. I'm
going to need a Camera Labs strap. I don't have one of those.
I'll sort you out with one.
You know, in the camera news recently has been a company called Peak Designs. Trey Ratcliffe collaborated on the design of a camera bag. And if you have a big camera, it's a very nice bag. The bag's too big for me. But Peak Design is a firm here in San Francisco that really does some nice products. And this is a strap. This is one called the Slide Light. And it's a pretty wide strap. This is one for mirrorless cameras. They make one that's even wider for full big DSLRs. But it's got these really nice buckles. You can easily unhook it by just pushing in this little button. It's an extremely comfortable strap. And that's, of course, one of the biggest things for me. It's got, if you can see it in the video, there's a little bit of rubber on one side of the strap here. And so if you are putting this over a shoulder instead of around your neck and you don't want it to slip off, this little bit of rubber does a great job of grabbing your neck. It's got really nice slide adjusters here, so you can change the length of it very quickly and very securely. Like I say, you can take it on and off using the little gadgets. And if I've got it here somewhere on my desk, I don't think I do, they make a wrist strap that you can also use with this. And the wrist strap is also extremely comfortable. I'm stalling as I look around, but no, it's not here. The wrist strap is really comfortable. The neck strap costs about, let's see, it's about $50 for this version. The little cuff, as they call it, is $20 version. Just marvelous products. Go to Peak Design. That's the site to go to. Okay, enough of my accessories. Gordon, you know, it's also been, I understand from your reviews, it's been quite a year for lenses.
Yeah,
and I think to wrap this up, I think, why don't you tell us sort of the highlights of lenses for the year?
Well, there were just so many. I remember a few years ago, when you were testing lenses, there would be some good ones, there'd be some ropey ones, and there'd be some outstanding ones. And it was so nice to review some outstanding ones. You'd go, crikey, look at the quality of this. You know, it's sharp right into the corners, even wide open. But they were very much in their minority. But yet in 2015, there were so many fantastic quality lenses. There's a real optical renaissance going on. And it's undoubtedly because of more advanced design, computer-aided design and manufacturing, and also the types of materials and coatings that are now available, not to mention corrections that can be performed in camera. And when you put all of those things together, you are getting lenses that deliver fantastic quality. So I just wanted to give a few shout outs to some lenses I've tested this year that have been great. I am going to mention Canon. The 11 to 24 millimeter f4 is an outstanding ultra wide zoom that goes wider, and that's full frame, 11 millimeter full frame on a zoom. That is an incredible piece of glass, absolutely gorgeous. Tamron released a 15 to 30 millimeter f2.8, again a full frame zoom that delivers superb quality, even overtook Nikon's 14 to 24 2.8. On the smaller formats, I've got here the Olympus f1.8 fisheye. This is an 8 millimeter fisheye. F1.8 again. if you're filming, imagine you're filming skateboarding videos or something like that, you can put this on an EM5 Mark II with the built-in stabilization and literally have a handheld rig that you can shoot film at low ISOs thanks to its f1.8 aperture. It's very bright for a fisheye. And again, get results in a package that is so small and light, compared to, I see people using, 5D Mark IIIs with a Canon fisheye, and they need to have it on a stabilized platform. It's big, it's heavy, it's expensive. This is real run and gun stuff. Fujifilm can do no wrong with their lenses at the moment. This is the 90mm f2, which I've reviewed at Camera Labs, is amazing. They also did a 16mm 1.4 this year. That was really, really good. Sigma is on a roll with its art series of lenses. There's now a 20, 24, 35, and 50. All of them are outstanding. Zeiss with its Otus line is expanding as well. Tamron has stabilized prime lenses. If you're in the Sony full-frame mirrorless system, there's some amazing stuff going on. Sony itself have got a gorgeous 35 1.4, a really nice 90mm macro, and Zeiss, the Loxias and the Batis lenses, Batis, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, also absolutely stunning. So every system, regardless of what you've got, there are some fantastic lenses available now, and it's just been very, very exciting for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this is particularly for the four mirrorless manufacturers that we mentioned so often: Sony, Fujifilm, Olympus, and Panasonic Lumix. For so long, certainly in the Sony world, people have criticized the manufacturers for lack of good lenses, and now they're really fleshing out these lines. I think 2016 is going to be a big year for more lenses in terms of when I look at the lineups about what's coming out. Micro Four Thirds, of course, has a pretty good stable already. And also we've got, as you mentioned, some of the third-party manufacturers, if you will, Tamron, Sigma, Zeiss, people who are making lenses for these cameras have finally realized that there's money to be had, and they're looking and they're saying, all right, the Sony A mount, it's legitimate. Let's make lenses for it. Micro Four Thirds is pretty much, dominated by the two manufacturers, but Fuji as well. We're getting people to make lenses for the Fuji X mount.
And you've got Samyang as well doing manual focus full frame lenses that are cheap and very, very good. If you're willing to sacrifice autofocus, all these other options become available. Hey, Doug, I wanted to mention one other accessory. I know we said there wouldn't be time. I'm going to squeeze it in regardless in half a minute. This is a trigger trap cable. This is what I use for my long exposure photography. It lets you use your mobile phone and an app that you download free of charge as a sophisticated cable release or intervalometer. I use it for my long exposure photography. It's about $40 with a connection to a camera of your choice. I use it in conjunction with a Lee Big Stopper. This is my 10-stop neutral density filter. The two big manufacturers for ND filters are Lee and Format High Tech, which are both based in the United Kingdom. So that's very nice. I believe you're a Format High Tech man, Doug.
I am. I switched from Lee to Format High Tech.
Ooh.
I just not for the Big Stopper. I use the Lee 10-stop Big Stopper just as you do. But for my neutral density filters, I've switched to Format High Tech.
And this is, I should point out, this is part of the 7.5 system. This is not a 100mm filter. This is like a 7cm filter. It's very small and compact for systems that don't require massive filters. So because I shoot exclusively with smaller mirrorless formats, I can use smaller filters. It's all part of what makes going to a smaller camera nicer, smaller accessories, smaller tripods, that are still sufficiently stable. So this is the filter system that I use when I'm doing long exposure stuff on Fuji and Olympus.
Yes, I'm jealous. I'm still with the 100s and some of the longer 150 filters for like the graduated filters and so forth. Well, very good. Yes, and I also have a trigger trap. I haven't used it for many years. I bought it when it first came out, and I too was impressed with it. I think it's very nice. One of the problems with these remotes, though, is having to leave your cell phone connected to it. Sometimes the time.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that you've got invariably in the dark as well when you're using it, a potentially very expensive product hanging off the end of a cable. I've seen people who use them in conjunction with little kind of brackets or grips that are mounted on a tripod, so the phone just kind of clips into that. But still, it is quite a nice product, and I found myself using this a great deal this year.
All right, well, I'm going to spring one more surprise on you, Gordon. What are you looking forward to in 2016 in the world of photography?
Well, I was going to say keeping hold of all my teeth, but in the world of photography, Well, I'm hoping for Sony to improve their menu system and controls and ergonomics, bigger sensors and smaller bodies. I'm really happy, Doug. I have to say I'm very happy with where we're at the moment, and that a lot of manufacturers are releasing firmware updates to really enhance existing bodies. You know, Olympus, Fujifilm, Sony have all been doing that this year and enhancing their products. It's really nice.
Well, let's see if we can both go 12 months without purchasing a single new camera.
That's not going to happen.
Well, Gordon, it's been a great year. Thank you for joining All About the Gear this past year. It's been a pleasure working with you, and really have brought a lot to making All About the Gear a better show.
Well, thank you very much. It's been really enjoyable. And as always, we've got full reviews of these on All About the Gear if you want to hear me and Doug talk about them. And we have full reviews of them at cameralabs.com as well.
And if you're interested in purchasing any of these cameras or any other cameras that you can possibly imagine, head over to cameralabs.com and click on the Buy Now links. The little pennies that come in help us keep the show on the air. Gordon, thanks again, and we'll see you next year.
Bye.
Okay, and this is Doug Kay, and once again, we'll see you next time on All About the Gear.